Shalom Avraham Yerushalayim Kodesh. We are privileged this evening to study together the Haftarah of Parshat Korach. I find it fascinating as we study the book of Samuel, specifically the end of chapter 11 and chapter 12, the attitudes that are portrayed in our Haftarah, which reflect a great similarity to some of the ideas that are reflected in the parasha. We have mentioned on many occasions that often the theme of the Haftarah is a parallelism to the theme of the Parashat Hashavua. Now, in the parasha, if you remember, in Parshat Korach, when Moshe is accused of all types of many different accusations on the part of people who are trying to undermine his position and are accusing him of usurping power improperly. One of the statements that Moshe makes is, God, I never took anything from these people. How could they accuse me of such behavior? Lo, I'm quoting from the Torah section of Korach, chapter 16. Verse 15. Lo chamor echad mehem nasati. I never even took a donkey from any of them. I never rode any of their if I had to take care of my own transportation, needs, I took care of it myself. I didn't take anything from them. Lo chamor echad mehem nasati. Not a single donkey have I ever taken of theirs. It means they're accusing me of taking away everything in the community. They're accusing me of leading the community improperly. I was so sensitive to the property rights, to the ownership rights of everyone in the community. And even though a leader is allowed to ride, a donkey that belongs to the community, that's part of the communal need, and that's part of what's accepted to be a leadership a quality need, which is accepted all over the world. But Moshe said, I went the extra mile in this area. And lo chamor echad mehem nasati. I never took a donkey from anybody. So why would they accuse me? Why would they accuse me of taking away everything of theirs? And in the Haftarah, Shmuel, the prophet Samuel, reflects a very, very similar idea. If you want to follow those people who have a text in front of them, it's Samuel 1, chapter 12, verse 3. And you hear the exasperation of Shmuel and Rabbi, where he says, I challenge anyone. I challenge anyone. Is there anyone here who could tell me that I took anything from them? Is there anything I took from you inappropriately? And he says, Hineni anuvi. I'm reading chapter 12, verse 3. Here I am. Say something against me. Et shar mi lakachti. Have I ever taken an ox? Oxen were used in plowing fields in different forms of whose ox have I ever taken? Anybody here have anything to say? Well, the people seemingly were inappropriately accusing the leadership of improper kinds of activities. It's so sad sometimes. We're a leader of a community. We're a religious leader of a community. Where people talk behind their back and they say, well, you see that donkey that Shmuel is riding on? It's our donkey, that's public money. He's taking away the money, he's taking away from the communal fund. Oh, you see the house that he has? He built it with our money. You see his clothes? It's really our clothes. And this is a common argument, unfortunately, and a common criticism of leadership. Till, God forbid, I hope never again, but even till today, I met a great leader many years ago. He was a leader of a congregation. He was a leader of a great synagogue. And one Shabbat I was with him on the other side of the world, across the Mediterranean, across the Atlantic Ocean. That's not important where. And he was crying to me. I said, why? He said, because when I bought a new car, that's what he told me. So when I bought a new car, there were members of the board of directors. He said, you know how the rabbi bought his new car? It's our money. You know, he stole he stole the congregational money. You know, I couldn't believe it. You know, he said I have like exact records of my income and exact records. But maybe there's a tendency on the part of the people in the time of Moshe and in the time of Shmuel. You follow what I'm saying? You understand? It's like a common.
It's today now.
I'm sorry.
It happens right now today.
I hope not. I hope we've had the last case already. I hope in world history, you know. And Shmuel says, and this is very beautiful, and maybe this is the obligation. And when he was crying, this rabbi was crying, literally crying. I said, well, why don't you just tell them? He said, I plan on having a meeting and explaining it to them. But sometimes I guess certain kinds of activities on the part of Torah leaders, you know, maybe it hits a certain delicate, a sensitive chord on the part of the constituents, and they just don't know how to deal with it. So Shmuel says, "Et shor milakachti." Have I ever taken anyone's ox? V'chamor milakachti. It's almost the exact words of Moshe Rabbeinu. Yes. Have I ever taken payment from anyone? Has anyone ever bribed me? Tell me. I want to respond. And if you think I did take something from you, I'll give it back to you. V'ashiv lachem. Look at these beautiful words. V'ashiv lachem. And then the people say, okay, you're right. Lo lakachta sentence 4. Lo lakachta miyad ish ma'uma. So it's beautiful words, you know. I wish every congregation would say that to every congregational leader, every spiritual leader should have these words said by their congregation. You have not taken anything. You have not taken anything from us. Lo lakachta miyad ish ma'uma. And you know, I studied under the tutelage of great rabbis. Some of them who refused to take any kind of salary. Now I understand it's almost impossible to carry out because you're allowed to take a salary and you have to take a salary, otherwise we wouldn't be able to have leaders who would be dedicated to their congregations and to their institutions. Rambam, for instance, speaks about how great it is for a Torah teacher to be above payment, to try to teach without money, because it seems that in many people's minds there's a distortion. Once money is involved, so people get confused with what's proper and what's improper. And I wish that every single leader would be on the level, maybe they are, on the level of Shmuel Hanavi, on the level of Moshe Rabbeinu. The rabbis say a leader that wants to enjoy the goods and services of his community is permitted to do so. It's permitted to do so. Remember the prophet Elisha? He ate in this one's house. He had. Remember, we learned, I think, it together in this very context. Remember the Shunammite woman who built him a special, apartment, and whenever he would go around, he would enjoy the food and the services. But perhaps, suggest the rabbis, whoever wants to be on the level of Shmuel Hanavi, that's a different kind of level. We read earlier in the book of Samuel, if you're interested, it's in chapter 7, verse 17. Utishuvato haramata kisham beto, which according to one reading means, one rabbinic reading, he would return to Ramah. So similar, because that's where he lived. He was in Ramah. Shuvato haramata. After his travels, he would go back to Ramah kisham beto. That was his house. The rabbis say that wherever he went, that was his house. You know why? He took his house with him. He had like a traveling house, because he didn't want anyone to say, I gave lodging, I gave food, I gave provisions to Shmuel. He wanted to stay above that. Can everyone do that? It's not expected of everyone. But it's truly a very, very high level, and I think, especially in communities where there are people who are so suspicious of rabbi, so suspicious of spiritual guides, so suspicious of spiritual leaders. The whole problem with Korach, right? I mean, one Hasidic Rabbi said, jokingly, maybe half jokingly, half serious, I don't know. It says that the children of Korach did not die, right? They Korach lo metu, that's what it said. So you know what he said? He said, there's no picture in the book, but I think he said it with a half smile. He says, you know what it means they didn't die? they're still around. They're still around. All those people who are trying to undermine the Moshe Rabbeinu of their community. Do you know how many people suffer? You know how many congregational rabbis have suffered because of false accusations on the part of congregants? May it never happen again. You know how many Korach type rebellions go on, or went on, not go on. That's what they never will go on again. But you know how many times? Innocent people, Moshe Rabbeinu, great people, righteous people. So spiritual giants. But maybe it comes from jealousy, or maybe it comes from misunderstanding. And one of the great ways of removing it is if only we would be able to do it without any money. I know this is not at all realistic, and I just bless all the rabbis in the world. All the rabbis, they should all be able, independently wealthy, happily, and healthfully. They should never need any salary. Rabbi Miller, under whose tutelage I was privileged to study, Rabbi Victor Miller, when his children all were married, when the last of his children got married, he went to the board of his synagogue and he asked for a decrease in salary. He said, I want you to lower my salary. Lower my salary? Yeah, lower my salary. That's not usually the way most people fill out forms. It's like, that's not usually the way it's done, right? Why do you want to lower? I said, because until now I had to support my children. Now, thank God, they're on their own. I don't need as much money. I wish we can get to the point where all communities will be able to say, Shmuel Hanavi's great statement in our Haftarah. Is there anyone who really thinks that this is theirs? Is there anyone who really thinks that I took things inappropriate? Well, say it. Here's a chance. Get up at a community meeting. If only we can get to the point where all spiritual giants, all spiritual Torah teachers will be able to teach Torah without any money attached to it. Where all spiritual guides will be able to guide their communities on the levels of Shmuel Hanavi, on the levels of the great prophet that we study about in our Torah section. Whoever paid Moshe for teaching Torah, there was no. Moshe taught more Torah probably than anyone in world history. See, I've taught you. Ma'ani b'chinam, afatem b'chinam. Can we get back to that stage? Can we get back to the stage where no money is exchanged? Not because it can't be. Not because, there are many heterim, there are many levels of permissibility. A person needs to survive, a person needs to eat, a person needs to drink, a person puts so much effort into or giving up other jobs in order to take this. But maybe on the level of Shmuel Hanavi, maybe that's the level that we celebrate this week as we study Parshat Korach. Maybe there are many, many communities in the world who really need Harotzeh Lehanot. Yehanek Elisha. There is an approach of Elisha. There is an approach where you're allowed to take. But maybe in certain communities, if only we could find the Shmuel Hanavi to lead them. If only every community could be blessed with the Shmuel Hanavi leadership. We do pray that never again should there be any rebellion against any Torah leader. Surely not on the level of, God forbid, of Korach, rebelling against the greatest people in the world, Moshe and Aaron. Or never should anyone ever suspect anyone on the level of Shmuel Hanavi. We hope that La'olam Yotzi Adam et Atzmo min ha'chashad. Each person should be beyond even suspicion, and the great words of Shmuel Hanavi in our Haftarah should be the guiding lights for all spiritual Torah teachers and leaders throughout the world. Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah.